I know a lot of you, but there's a fair number I don't. So I want to give you a little introduction or a little taste of who I am and who I was before I ran for office the first time. I used to be a photojournalist for about 30 years, and back in 2000 I was on assignment for National Geographic, and I was working in Australia at the time. And one day I found myself in the Indian Ocean off Mangalore Reef on the west coast of Australia. I was swimming in water that was thick with plankton. I was working with just a mask, snorkel, and fins that day. And all of a sudden, out of this thick, gloomy water comes a school bus-sized whale shark with a mouth about... Now, I know that whale sharks are plankton feeders. But my lizard brain just sees a really, really big shark headed my direction. I took a quick breath and I dove down to the shark's level and I started shooting. The shark is coming right at me and he's coming fast. So I started swimming backwards to keep him in frame. And I thought, all this time I'm thinking that this shark is going to turn away eventually. At the last second, when it was obvious the shark wasn't going to turn away and I was almost out of breath, I tucked the camera into my chest so I wouldn't hurt the shark, and I ducked under its mouth. As I'm rolling down this shark's belly, it occurred to me that as I passed the tail, if it hit me, I could be knocked unconscious. It didn't, obviously. And I popped up, checked the camera, I was out of film, so I swam over to the dive boat. When I climbed out to change film, the captain came up to me and he said, "That was wild. When the shark passed over you, it sort of rose up in the water column. And as the tail passed you, it stopped finning. The shark was trying to keep from hurting me." So that moment resulted in my second cover for National Geographic Adventure. And that very close encounter with that obviously sentient and empathetic being further cemented my love for the oceans and all of the magnificent creatures that live within them. The decisions we make, the things we do as a society are putting all life on Earth at risk. Between climate change, oil spills, excessive nutrient runoff, overfishing, plastics, and other forms of pollution, the National Geographic estimates that by 2048, the vast oceans will be effectively dead. So the oceans and their fate are not the only catastrophic things that we have to be concerned about. We have people who are working full-time jobs who are living in poverty or even homelessness. We have folks who are dying because they can't access healthcare, can't afford to access healthcare, or they're having to ration their life-saving drugs. We have young people going off to fight wars, to be dismembered, to be psychologically traumatized or be killed, so that billionaires and their corporations can steal the natural resources of other countries and profit off the very war itself. We have young people who are choosing to either go into crippling debt or not to become everything that they can become, because we have decided as a society that our secondary education should be a profit center rather than a way to unlock the full potential of all of our young people and, frankly, the full potential of our country. We are poisoning our water, our land, and our families so that giant agribusinesses can maximize their profits. We are making life untenable on this planet for ourselves, for the whale sharks, and for the koalas, and every other species that we share this planet with, so that oil barons and their stockholders can amass vast fortunes on which they will pay little to no taxes. The concept or the ideology of unlimited growth is shared by only two species that I'm aware of. The neoliberal economist and the cancer cell, both of which are particularly destructive to their hosts. None of this is sustainable, either environmentally or economically. We are at a point in our history where dramatic change is required. We need people who are going to prioritize the environment, who are going to prioritize, make health a human right rather than a profit center, prioritize our youth and getting them educated, paying people a living wage. All of these things have been problems for years, decades, but certainly for the last 10 or 12 years. And choosing to elect the same people to not solve those problems some more is the definition of insanity. Mm-hmm. We have to start sending people to Washington, D.C. that have the backbone to stand up to the corporations, that are not going to be taking any money from corporations. I am not currently taking any money, nor will I ever take donations from any corporations whatsoever. That way, I will always be only beholden to you, to the voters. So, I know that was a lot of doom and gloom. Here's what gives me hope. I'm not the only one out there that's doing this. You saw in the last election, 5 or 6 people got elected who are behaving exactly the same way. They're not taking corporate money, they're not towing the corporate line, and they are becoming superstars. Think about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a young woman who was Puerto Rican, who was a bartender, right? What are the odds? And yet, a lot of people consider her the 4th or 5th most powerful politician in America today. Why? Because she is not towing the corporate line. She is actually standing up for people, and she's doing it loudly, and she's doing it brilliantly. There are roughly 100 people like her that are running for office right now today. We have an opportunity to really shift Congress. Obviously, we need a new president. We also need to flip the Senate. But even if we do that, if we have a Congress that is still sold out to the corporations, nothing's going to change. Those folks will fight tooth and nail to keep the status quo. It benefits the billionaires and the millionaires. So, what gives me hope is the possibility of the things that we can do. We can pass a Green New Deal. We can put people to work solving the problems that we have, and we can pay them a really good living wage to do it. We can, like I said, make healthcare a human right and pass Medicare for all and make sure that everybody is covered for every form of healthcare. Mental, dental, vision, long-term healthcare. I don't know if any of you have had to experience this, but long-term care is insanely expensive, and it literally causes couples to have to become divorced simply so that the person who needs the care is poor enough to be able to qualify for long-term care. That's crazy. We do all of these things because we're allowing corporations, whether it's insurance companies or pharmaceutical industry or the oil companies or Monsanto or some other big agribusiness company, all of these things that are happening to us are happening for them. The tax breaks that the billionaires got under Trump, you know, that's going to keep happening until we start replacing corporate Democrats and as many Republicans as possible. So, I had no particular interest in living in DC for my 60s. But I love my children, and I care very deeply about your children and your grandchildren, and I want them to have a planet that they can survive on. That is why I'm running. And I will do everything in my power to win, and then everything in my power to make the changes that we need to make in this country to solve those problems. It is within our power to make that happen. It truly is. We just have to decide that that's what we're going to do. We're going to buck the status quo. We're going to buck the concepts that, oh, that kind of person can't win an election. Really? A Puerto Rican bartender? She had 1/10 of the money that he has. And he was literally the 5th most powerful Democrat in Congress. And she beat him badly.
Yes.
Badly. It is well within our power to shift Congress. So, I strongly recommend, I humbly ask you to support me and to help me in this race, and that you look out across this country. I was endorsed by brand new Congress. That's the same group that endorsed Ocasio-Cortez. I am on the slate.
Wow.
There are about 30 of us. And Zachariah and I got to go back to DC a couple months ago and meet them. And they are extraordinary people. Really extraordinary people. So, if you have the wherewithal and the interest, support them as well. We can shift Congress. So I will stop talking and ask for questions if folks have questions. This is Zachariah.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Zachariah. As Mark is taking questions, Kendra and I are handing around a sign-in sheet. So if you want to receive updates from the campaign, I encourage you to put your name, email, phone number down. And if you want to volunteer, there's other places where you can mark that down as well, because we are a people-powered campaign. Thank you all.
Hi, thank you for being here tonight, for everything that you said. I really appreciate it. One of my biggest reasons that I've gotten involved in politics, not something I thought I'd be doing while raising a 13-year-old and 11-year-old and working full-time, was to reduce gun violence in our country and to keep my kids safe when they go to school, and for us when we go to our big communities, and on and on and on. So I really want to hear your stance on gun violence prevention specifically, closing loopholes, red flag laws, universal background checks, and safe storage. Our current congressman has not been supportive in many ways around this issue. So,
yeah. So I support all of those. So there's I think it's called the Denver Protocol, which lists a number of things that we need to be doing. So I used to, in my sort of little speech there, I used to have a line about we allow our children to be hunted in their own schools. But that was just too damn depressing. But it's reality, right? You know, have, to me, that's mind-blowing. I've seen a lot of the world, and there's no place that's not a war-torn country that is even remotely a possibility, except here in America. So, yes, I would limit magazine capacities. I would pass the red flag laws, although they don't like it to be called that. Mandatory background checks, safe storage, the entire Denver Protocol. I support all of it.
Yeah, since you're with Ocasio and that group of people, they are typically identified as socialist Democrats. I myself think that capitalism as our economic system is based on eternal growth, which is nonsense. Can't happen. So I'm wondering what your position will be to try and move us in a direction. Right now there seems to be a tremendous stigma when you use the word socialism, and how we're going to defeat this capitalist economy that insists upon extracting natural resources from the earth.
I'm going to interrupt a little bit. Just because of time, I got to have you ask questions, and there's social comment that comes with it, but please keep it to a question because we're running out of time. And I just assume get as many questions as we can.
Sure. So, fire departments, police departments, roads, water, sewer, it's all socialist, right? We pay our taxes and we supply that. The government supplies that. Anybody who tells you socialism is bad wants to live in a country that doesn't have any of those things. Or they want to have to pay a toll every time they get on the road, or they want to have a subscription to their fire department so they'll come when their house is burning down, but too bad if their neighbor's house burns down because they can't afford that subscription. That's socialism. It's nuts that this is Red Scare stuff, and you would think we would be over it by now.
Yeah.
We have a president that's colluding with the Russians, and yet his party is the one that will go blah, 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 socialists. Seriously? I mean, I tell that joke about the cancer cell because it's true. We cannot, unlimited growth is not possible. We do not live on an unlimited planet. We have reached and surpassed the carrying capacity of this planet for our species. We have to live differently. We have to become more of a caring society that takes care of one another, that takes care of the least of us in all ways. So I do not shy away from the people pointing me out as socialist. Fine, I'm socialist.
Yeah, Mark, what is your strategy as far as people volunteering for knocking on doors? I know these campaigns need money, and since you're not taking corporate, I'll put that forth so you can answer that question.
Sure. We will happily take donations from individuals. I think we've raised roughly $140,000 so far. We have over 1,200 people signed up to volunteer. So that's a lot of doors. People care very much about this race. People are tired of not being represented, particularly Democrats are tired of not being represented. But frankly, I've spoken to a number of Republicans that are pretty tired of not being represented either. And here's the thing, even though I'm painted by the centrists and the Republicans as being somewhat socialist, I'm a mayor, and mayors are practical. Potholes are neither Democrat nor Republican. Sewer pipes are neither Democrat nor Republican, right? Mayors solve practical problems. We need a lot more small town mayors, big city mayors in Congress because they learn to have conversations with a council that doesn't necessarily agree with each other, with other people. I work with the Metro Mayors Consortium. About half of us are Republicans, about half of us are Democrats. And about 75 to 80% of all the things we engage on, we all agree on because it's practical. We need a whole lot more people in Congress that can behave like that, instead of squabbling like school kids and not solving America's problems. We have significant existential problems that we're facing. We need people who will get in, roll up their sleeves, go to work, and buck the system and solve these problems.
One more question, and then I have to move on, I'm sorry. Okay.
Sorry.
Hoping to hear your thoughts on how we solve the problems with our democracy, getting people elected in the first place with all the gerrymandering and all that stuff.
Well, obviously, we got to reverse Citizens United. That's the first step. I am a strong proponent for publicly funded elections. I think we should completely get rid of any kind of concept where elections can be purchased, and currently they are. I mean, in a vacuum, all things being equal, the person with the most money is going to win the election. Is that really what you want? So, what that results in is we have more millionaires per capita in Congress than there are anywhere else in this country. And they represent the other millionaires really well. But they're not representing us very well. And as long as we have a system that's dependent on money, that's going to be the case. The other thing we need to do is change the laws so that states can't gerrymander. And I mean that for the democratic states like ours, as well as the Republican. People should be choosing their politicians. Politicians should not be choosing their constituents.
Yeah.
So, there's more on that, but Peter's wanting back the microphone. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you all. Thank you for your patience on it, but we